Hello everyone, my name is Roya and this is Riku, and today we're going to talk about cats in books. No, I'm just kidding. This is my my wrap up of the first half of what I read in the first half of April. It just so happens that quite a few of these books do have cats, and the cats do live. This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me by Ilona Andrews. This just came out. This is about a girl who goes into the world of her favorite book and basically has to try to stop what is going to ultimately happen where everybody dies. So this book that she goes into the world of is a very kind of Game of Thrones level dark. It's pretty brutal how many people try to kill her, and she actually cannot die. So she just comes back to life every time someone kills her, which is many times because, like I said, it's very, very dark, this world of this book. So it's basically like reading a really, really dark, awful, like sad fantasy book. However, it is not the kind of, it gives us a little bit of an extra thing where the main character is from our world. And so she makes references to things like YouTube and just stuff that that only exists for her. So that gave me the ability, I feel like that gives me the ability to read a really dark, sad fantasy book like Game of Thrones and other similar things, however, with that added element in it. And that's what I really like about Portal Fantasies. I really like that, you know, the main character is not from that world, so she is used to things like modern amenities and has to actually like make comparisons between things and all of that. However, the thing that I found was very missing about this was how she gets there and what kind of life she had before getting there, because basically this book starts with her already finding herself to be in this world. There is nothing connecting, you know, so ultimately when she's talking about trying to like find a way to get home, we don't know why she, you know, there's no urgency there. Like, why does she want to get home so badly? What kind of life did she have that she's missing? We don't have a clue what she's trying to get home to. And so I felt like that was missing. And then the other thing too is that the book that she's in does not exist in real life. It's a real book where she comes from, but in real life it is not a real book. So we do not know the twists that happen, but she does. So for example, when there's a twist as far as who a character really is versus who they're pretending to be and who she thinks they were, and then something happens and she goes, oh no, and basically we don't know that that means, oh, that's not really, that guy's not really who he says he is. Only she knows that. So it'll be like a chapter will leave off on a cliffhanger, but we don't know why it's a cliffhanger because we don't know her reaction to it until the next chapter starts, where it's actually spelled out for us. This guy is somebody else, or this is actually not like this, like how she thought it was, based on what she has read in the book that she's in. So the fact that we are missing a lot of knowledge that the main character actually does have was also a weak point of this story, but overall I really enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed being able to read a fantasy book that is a lot like other fantasy books that I really enjoyed without it being exactly the same because the main character is from this world. Lift by Anne-Marie Chaker. This is a nonfiction book that explores dismantling the narrative that thinness equals health. So the author is a bodybuilder and talks a lot about how she started working out once she was working out for the sake of just being somebody who works out rather than trying to be thinner or anything like that, and to focus more on strength rather than trying to lose weight or anything. And it really definitely talks a lot about stuff that I can really relate to as a woman and as a musician as well, in what we constantly hear from society and everyone around us about being thin and how that's the goal. And whereas obviously all bodies are completely different and we shouldn't even be thinking about thinness, and it's not any kind of indicator of health, but we hear that all the time. And so I found this to be extremely relatable as someone who has tried really hard to be thin, and that's just not my body type. I just cannot be thin. I will always be fat no matter what I do. And it also talks a lot about talking to kids about eating healthy and keeping the weight part of it and the calories or whatever out of the conversation. Just talk about, you know, eat this, it's good for you type of thing, which definitely is super important, because even when I was a kid and I was fat and my parents always tried to push me to do sports, and even though they didn't say you're fat, I could tell that the whole reason they were trying to push me into different sports was because I was fat, and they wanted me to be thinner. And like as a kid, you can tell, and kids can tell, they pick up on that. And so basically it talks a lot about women and how women should be strong and can be strong and are strong, and that's the real thing that we should be looking at, and there's plenty involved in what's health and what's fitness. And so I expected, you know, I read this hoping that it would motivate me a lot now that I am getting more working out into my lifestyle, but it definitely motivated me a lot more than I think that I thought it would. And another thing that she mentions at the end of the book as well is that she basically has an entirely different weight when she is preparing to do a bodybuilding competition versus afterwards, because after the competition is over, she has to actually eat differently to gain more fat back. So she only has six-pack abs when she's on stage at the competition. And that in itself is something that's the only part we see. Whereas the bodybuilders that we see doing these things, they don't actually have abs in real life. It's just for the competition. And so we see that and we think, oh, people have abs if they're fit, but like, no, that's actually not true. Agnès Albert's Mystical Cat Shelter, I did film a full review of this book and it was so good, but I really had my issues with the story as a whole and continuity and all of that, but I thought that the cats were done so well, and I really hope that we get more books about cats to this degree, because basically this should have been my perfect book, a fantasy book about cat rescue, but ultimately everything about the actual story outside of the cat rescue aspect really fell apart. So I really hope that we get more books like this, and I love that this book is being so talked about, because I think that it will ultimately lead to our getting more books like this where cats are treated well in the story, and that, you know, animal rescue aspects are actually focused on and what constitutes good animal welfare, all of that. So if you do want to hear more of my thoughts about the actual book itself, the whole story, you can definitely check out my review. The First Binding, this is a fantasy book about, basically it's like Name of the Wind, but South Asian inspired, and has a lot more story. As I was reading it, I felt, just because of the sheer number of story arcs, the amount of plot that gets squeezed in, that is like just a lot. It made me feel like when the first time I watched the first episode of Battlestar Galactica, because it's 3 hours long because it was a mini series, and I had to pause in between and halfway through watch the other half of it the next day, because it was just a lot, even though I loved it. And that happened subsequently to everybody that I showed it to as well. So that's basically what I felt like while reading this book. I actually had to put it down a couple of times because it was just a lot, but I loved it. And there's a cat in it that is that becomes the main character's like companion animal almost, towards the end of the story, that I really loved. Weaving Shaw, this is a book about a girl who can see ghosts, and she basically ends up having to work for this guy who collects confessions from people so that she can see the ghosts surrounding those people, the people that they inevitably may have killed or had some beef with them or whatever the thing is. And basically this book could have been really good if it weren't for the love interest. Basically, the love interest being a jerk and B, a really weak character just ruined this entire book so much. So he starts off the story being really awful, like really, really awful to the main character, like borderline evil, and nothing happens really to change that. He just kind of flips a switch and decides to be nice all of a sudden, and then he becomes a love interest, and I'm like, why? Nothing, like everything he's done up to that point is so irredeemable. Why would somebody he treated that way ever want to be with him? I don't understand. And so I just found that to be so icky and so weird, and I just could not get into this book because of that. Other than that, this was a really good book and could have been great. Prodigal Tiger, this is about a girl who basically goes back to her family after spending a long time at a magic school across the country, and her whole family is magical as well, but they basically feel like she kind of ditched them to go to magic school, and they almost don't take it seriously that she went to magic school, and they kind of treat it like she just went on vacation or something, and they don't really take her seriously. And so a lot of this story ends up being about like her trying to find her home again after having left it for so long, and also not planning to stick around either, but she still wants to like be a good friend to her friends who she basically left behind and all of that other stuff. And so I found this to be a really good book. I think it could have been better. I think we could have had more depth to the overall storyline and all of that, but I really liked it. And finally, Queen of Faces, the best book that I've read all year. This is actually my first 5-star rating that I've given a book yet this year. This is basically about two main characters who live in a world that is kind of like Altered Carbon, but fantasy. Basically, people can get new bodies. They can like put their soul into a different body. Whenever they want, whenever they have the ability to buy a different body, or whatever. And so we have two main characters. One of them is a girl who had a terminal illness as a child, and the only body that her parents could put her in prior to her dying was just a like really generic dude body. And so she's been this kind of just like dude for a decade almost, and she not only hates being a dude, because she does not feel like a dude at all, she is a girl, but also her body is decaying. She has gotten, you know, like her body is sick. She only has a year to live. So she has to be able to do enough to afford a new body. And then our other main character is a girl who was from a prominent family and everything, but her mother actually kicked her out, made her switch bodies with someone else because she wanted a different daughter, which is just so messed up. So both of these main characters definitely deal with a lot of gender, body dysphoria, and overall just urgency of trying to get their lives back, while also not really knowing the whole truth of who they or anybody else around them is. And this whole book really calls into question, who are people? How do we know who people are? What makes somebody them? How are they, on what level are they still them if they're not the same body? It's so weird and so strange, and I loved reading this. It was so good, and the cat survives. So anyway, those are the books that I read in the first half of April. Please let me know if you have any thoughts on any of these, if you've read any of these, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!